All right, hey, it's good to be back with you again today. And today we're going to talk about building intimacy with emotional connection. This YouTube video ties really well with the previous one that we sent out. And I'm excited to talk with you today about this important concept. So many couples don't know how to build the emotional intimacy in their relationship, or even that there's different levels of emotional intimacy that exist in relationships. So we're going to get into that today, and I look forward to sharing more with you soon. All right, building intimacy with emotional connection. So you'll remember in our previous YouTube video, building intimacy with physical touch, we went over different levels of physical intimacy that can exist in a relationship and how to use the physical connection in the relationship to strengthen intimacy. Now you remember that we defined intimacy as anything that we do in a relationship that helps build the connection, the attachment, the fulfillment of the relationship. And the same exists on the emotional side of the relationship, building intimacy with emotional connection, right? And that's our topic today. So just like we did with the physical intimacy in the relationship, I want to share with you a little bit the range of emotional intimacy that can exist, from really low level emotional intimacy to higher level emotional intimacy. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can engage your partner in a way that increases the emotional connection in your relationship, builds that intimacy through that emotional connection. So let's start with very low level emotional intimacy. So jumping in on the lowest level of emotional intimacy, we have small talk. And small talk is something that couples do in their relationship that has very little intimacy potential, and it also requires very little vulnerability. Now you remember in our last video as well, we talked about this 1-to-1 ratio between vulnerability and intimacy potential. The higher the vulnerability of an interaction in the relationship, the more intimacy potential that interaction has. And small talk requires very little vulnerability. So when we're taking a look at small talk, we're just talking about those things that we might discuss every day, that you might even discuss with a stranger. Things like the weather or traffic, right? Or things like being late to work, right? These really low level vulnerability topics that require very little vulnerability and are able to produce very little intimacy. It's why we typically use small talk when we're interacting with people we don't know really well. And we definitely want in our relationship and in a marriage, the communication connection to go deeper than just small talk, right? But it does start to form a connection with another person. In fact, small talk is something that we typically use when we're moving a stranger to an acquaintance. At the end of an interaction in line at your favorite bagel shop, right? You might talk to the person in front of you, and by the end of that conversation have moved them from a complete stranger to an acquaintance. And the thing that you did that helped you get acquainted with them more, a little bit more connected, is small talk, right? So very basic emotional connection can exist in small talk. Very little intimacy because it requires very little vulnerability. So if we take that a little bit deeper, then what we have next is engaged listening. And engaged listening is anytime I'm focused on learning about the other person that I'm interacting with. In a marriage, learning about my partner, right? So engaged listening is different than just listening. Engaged listening means I'm listening with intent to understand, right? I'm listening to know deeper and better my partner. And I'm showing that engagement by making eye contact, asking questions, maybe even making validating statements, right? So engaged listening is a way to take that conversation a little bit deeper. We might begin with some small talk, and as I do some engaged listening, we might get into a little bit deeper understanding. If my partner was sharing about the traffic on her way to work, right, I might say, man, was it more than usual or about the same as typical, right? And she'll start to answer that, right? She'll say, yeah, it was lots more than usual. And I'd be like, wow, what do you think? Was there like an accident or something, right? And she might be like, actually, yes, I drove past this accident, and here we go, right? We're talking and we're building intimacy in that connection. It's a lot more intimacy than if I wouldn't have responded at all, right? If she would have said, yeah, the traffic was terrible on the way to work, and I was kind of like, huh. Right? I just let the communication drop. So this engaged listening can do a really good job of building that emotional intimacy a little bit deeper, strengthening that connection in our relationship. So if I'm going to take it a little bit deeper then, I might do some expressing interests and preferences in the relationship. So when I do this, I'm sharing mild to moderate needs, desires, things that I enjoy, problems that I'm having with my partner, right? There's a little bit more vulnerability here, and I'm sharing in a little bit more intimate way. I'm kind of opening them up to me a little bit more, helping them know me and helping them understand those needs and preferences and things like that in the relationship. So this can be really helpful in building that emotional intimacy a little bit deeper, but it's something that we don't do with everyone. This is something we typically start to do as we feel a little bit closer to another person. And in our relationship, this is something we definitely want to be able to do. Sharing and communicating about these things helps build a strong relationship with our partner. All right, so if my goal is to take the emotional intimacy then even deeper, I might share meaningful experiences, right? So discussing significant events, thoughts, or even memories of the past with my partner. As we build this connection deeper with our partner, we want to again invite them in deeper and deeper. And sharing meaningful things about my day and also sharing meaningful things about my life can be a really wonderful way to do that. Right? So in my day, I might share with them a little bit about a conversation I had with a coworker that really stood out to me. It was either fun and happy and joyful, right? Or it was hard and difficult. I might share that with my partner. And if I feel like they care about me and they're connected to me, it makes that vulnerability even easier, right? Or I might share with them a memory that came up today, right? Maybe I was driving by a certain restaurant and it reminded me of this story when I was younger with one of my siblings. And I might come home and share that with my partner. Again, as we clue each other in to these meaningful parts of our life, that intimacy has a chance to grow and it can get deeper in our relationship. Okay, taking that intimacy now even a little bit further, I might prioritize shared time. So time to bond, to connect, to take the relationship to a deeper level. We want to set aside time for our partner. In marriage in particular, it's important that we're creating time on a regular basis to be with that person that we love. It's during those times that we're creating with one another that some of this intimacy can be built in our conversation and in our connection. So prioritizing that shared time. Okay, taking it a little bit deeper, revealing hopes and dreams. So sharing and exploring our greatest hopes, our dreams, some bucket list items that we have in life. This would be really awkward if I just walked up to a stranger and engaged on this deep of a level, right? Like if I walked up to a stranger and was like, hey, want to know one of my bucket list items? And they might be like, who the heck are you, right? So this is something that we do as we get closer to somebody. And it's a way that we can build the connection of our relationship even deeper, right? Through emotional intimacy, strengthening the connection in our relationship by revealing ourselves to our partner a little bit deeper, right? So talking about those things in my life that I hope for, that I dream about, right? That I desire to achieve. And if we're supportive partners, my hope is that my spouse will respond to that by making a mental note and maybe even helping me plan. How can we achieve that one day? How can we help bring that to pass in your life? All right, one step deeper, divulging passions or fears. So communicating those high-level, vulnerable passions or fears that I carry around in life. You'll notice as I start talking about this one that there starts to be fewer and fewer people in your world that you might take some of those passions or some of those fears to, that you would feel comfortable sharing them with. And the reason why is because they're extremely vulnerable to talk about. And as we keep discussing, high vulnerability means high intimacy potential. And we certainly want our partner to be somebody that knows some of those things about us and that we feel comfortable sharing those things with, right? So let's go even a little bit further. Creating shared experiences. So carrying out meaningful and significant shared memories or experiences with another person. So as we talked about revealing hopes and dreams, we're talking about those passions that we have in our world, right? This is taking those things and implementing them in our relationship in a way that I'm having some of these experiences with that most meaningful person. So it's kind of combining what I'm learning and sharing those meaningful experiences, prioritizing those hopes and dreams, taking those passions, and creating shared experiences with one another that help our relationship fulfill some of those things in our lives, right? And this starts to really hone in on just a few select people in my world and hopefully my partner being that pinnacle person that I'm creating these shared experiences with. The final level of emotional intimacy, the level that has the highest potential for building strong emotional connection in the relationship, is giving and receiving strength and support. So when you think about in your life, right, those people that you would turn to in your moment of need, right? If you found out you were diagnosed with a chronic illness and you only had 6 months to live, you start to think about, who would I tell, right? Who would you share that with? Well, the person that comes to mind is one of the people in your world that you have the highest level of emotional intimacy with, right? For most of us, there's only 1 or 2 or 3 people in our world that we would initially take that information to. And they're going to be the people that we feel the most connected to. And our hope is in marriage that that's your partner, right? That when we get down into these high level emotional intimacy places, just like with the physical intimacy that we talked about, that this is your partner. This is your partner that you're wanting to share on this type of a level with. And if it's not your partner yet, that becomes our goal, right? How do we help your relationship get to a place where that person is your partner? So this is the pinnacle of emotional intimacy. This sharing and receiving strength and support has the highest potential for intimacy in a relationship, and it also requires the highest level of emotional vulnerability in the relationship, right? And like we talked about earlier, that vulnerability and intimacy have a 1-to-1 correlation with one another. So what I would encourage at this point is to assess, in the spectrum of emotional intimacy, taking your partner and asking yourself the question, how deep do we go, right? Are we kind of operating in that small talk and engaged listening place on a day-to-day basis? Or are we doing some expressing of interests and preferences? Are we having some moments that we're sharing some meaningful things in our life? Are we prioritizing some shared time together? And do I know a lot about their hopes and dreams or their passions or fears, right? Do I spend some time understanding that and them with me, right? Have we talked about opportunities for creating shared experiences and even having some of those shared experiences? And have we had opportunities to share with each other those difficulties that are going on in our life? Now, the reason I ask you to assess this is because wherever you fall in this depth of emotional intimacy, if you want to increase the emotional intimacy in your relationship, the thing to focus on is the next thing on the list, right? So if you find yourself, for example, plateauing out with expressing interests and preferences, but you don't really ever go further than that, right? Like we talk about what we want for dinner tonight, right? Like pizza or lasagna, right? Or if we want some Mexican food, right? If that's about as deep as our conversations are going, right? Some of that small talk, engaged listening, and a little bit talking about some preferences, we're not getting very deep into the emotional intimacy. We probably are experiencing quite low emotional intimacy in the relationship, and it might be even impacting our ability to have strong physical intimacy in the relationship, because emotional intimacy is a nice prerequisite for many individuals for that physical desire and connection. So if we're finding that we're plateauing in this place, kind of sharing about these preferences in the relationship, our goal then would be to focus on sharing meaningful experiences more often. So it's taking that next item down in the list, right? And saying, on a regular basis, my partner and I want to focus on coming home at the end of the day and talking with each other about some meaningful things that happened during the day. And as you do that, as you share about some of those meaningful things in your day, you'll be taking your intimacy to the next level. And as you get good at sharing about those meaningful things in your day, then you'll take it one notch deeper, right? Your focus will start to become prioritizing shared time with one another, looking for opportunities to create more time with one another, to have that quality time, to do more sharing more frequently with each other. And if we get good at that, then we'll focus on the next one down, right? Taking that intimacy and vulnerability a little bit deeper by talking about things like hopes and dreams and passions and fears, right? We start to build into places where our emotional intimacy gets stronger and stronger. So that's my task to you, right? Take a look at that, assess where you are in your relationship, and then find the next level and begin focusing on that in your relationship. Now, if you want to learn more about this, like I shared in my last video, our Maintaining Intimacy in Sex video course goes into this emotional intimacy even deeper, especially the part 1 in that video course. The other cool thing about that video course is there's activity sheets that you can use and assignments that you can apply in your relationship to do some more deeper assessment of the emotional intimacy and to practice kind of building this emotional intimacy in your relationship. So I'd strongly encourage you to check that out. It also comes with a 65 questions a worksheet that you can use to kind of go back and forth with each other to find out deeper things about one another, to reveal some of those inner parts of one another, and to connect on a deeper level. So I'd strongly encourage that. In the comments, please share with us a little bit about where you feel like your emotional intimacy is. And if you have questions on how to take that next step, put those in the comments. We'd be happy to help, and I'm sure our other listeners would love to take a look at that dialogue back and forth on helping you build greater emotional intimacy in your relationship. As always, I'm so grateful for you joining us today. Please share our content, like our channel, subscribe to our channel, turn on that bell so that you can be notified every time we put a video out. And I really look forward to being with you again soon. Take care.